Hello again, everybody. This is another edition, the April 2022 edition of the NYSCOPBA podcast. I'm Brian Sullivan, the president of the Nassau County Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. I'm joined this month by Brian Doyle, the third vice president of COBA. We're going to do a video edition this time. I'm going to try and do video editions going forward because of some graphics and things that you could show, and I think it has a little bit more of a personal touch when you see a video as opposed to just audio, but it'll depend on the circumstances. Especially when you're showing certain types of documents, things like that, it's a little bit more of a personal touch when you show on a video. I'm going to be breaking this up again, as we've done in the past, into three different segments. With the first segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the longevity that's coming up. The vote will be coming up upon us quickly. The second edition, the second version of this is going to be talking about HALT, what's going on in New York State and how it affects us in Nassau County as well as everybody else in the state. And then the third segment is going to be about hiring, staffing, promotions, things like that. There's been a lot of talk lately about all these different things going on. So we're going to break it up into three different segments. We'll take a little break in between, and then, hopefully we'll get through it all. There's going to be a lot of information that we're throwing at you, so hopefully you take the time to listen to it all. To start off this segment, I want to talk about the longevity. This has obviously been a long time coming. We haven't had longevity. Our longevity's been frozen since 2011, just to refresh everybody's memories. It was frozen under the NYFA wage freeze lawsuit from 2011 to December 31st of 2017. That time frame, along with everything else in the NYFA lawsuit, was lost at the doorstep of the United States Supreme Court. We fought it all the way through all of the court systems in New York State. We fought it all the way through the court system of the federal government. And the U.S. Supreme Court chose not to hear us and upheld the lower court's decision in the federal court. So there was I want to talk about some rumors at the end of this segment about what's going on with longevity. And drives me crazy a little bit about where these rumors come from, whether it's within the department or outside. I'll get into that later on. But dispelling some of those things, one of the rumors that's out there is the fact that some people may be getting longevity back to 2011 in other units, and why aren't we getting it? That's a complete falsehood. Every union in Nassau County, all 5 unions, fought together throughout the whole NYFA lawsuit, and we're all in the same boat. We lost everything related to the freeze, particularly in this instance about longevity, until December 31st, 2017. Everything about the new longevity agreement going forward is from January 1st, 2018 until today. And that's what we're talking about in this agreement. Another thing that came out, another rumor, some stories came out, is that there were different agreements, that the 5 different unions in Nassau County signed different memorandums of agreement, and there's different things in there. Some people make out better than other ones, and some people will make out worse. I want to dispel that on this video log by showing everyone this is the MOA itself, the Memorandum of Agreement that spells out everything in it. Brian Doyle is going to get into it in a second. Every union signed off and initialed, including the county executive, at the bottom of each page. And the last page, give me a second here, this is the signature page with everybody's name on it. All of the unions and the county executive at the bottom of it. So that'll dispel any rumor that there's different separate agreements. I'm going to get into something in a second about some of the rumors that went on, but I'm going to kick it over to Brian Doyle so he could touch once again exactly on the meat and potatoes of what's in this agreement and in the fact sheet that we sent out.
All right. As Sully mentioned, longevity's been the subject of long-fought litigation. We did win in the lower court in New York State, and then it was appealed, and then we did receive an order to proceed to arbitration, where we do believe that we will be successful in arbitration. We do believe we have a strong case. The unknown is moving forward is what's really going to happen. It certainly appears like it's going down the same path as the NYFA wage lawsuit, and everybody thought, that's just got to be the right thing. We have to get a victory in that instance, and the same appears to be here. And the most reasonable thing to do, honestly, is to come to an agreement to try to get this issue rectified, get it moving forward. The agreement, the MOA, provides for the restoration of longevity at 72.22% of the former rate. It provides for half the money of the retro that was due under the old chart. I provided an email, COBA Blast was just sent out. I formulated a chart so that people could look up, their start date, their longevity date, their frozen rate, the rates that were included in the retro payment, and the new payment moving forward. Again, it's 50% of the retro that was owed, excuse me, in the 2018 agreement. The subject of longevity is something that has gone through multiple county executive administrations. Laura Curran's administration, they fought us tooth and nail. Bruce Blakeman was elected. He came in and really wanted to come to terms and get this put behind us. In the formulation of the agreement, there was it was addressed to identify what NYPA's concerns would be. That being said, the agreement provides for the county putting the money aside to pay for this longevity agreement, and that they do have an obligation to budget and pay for in the out years. In addition, it does provide NYPA, which they assert, it does provide structural change. So if NYPA decides to challenge us at all, we do believe that we've answered the questions that they would raise otherwise. All 5 unions within Nassau County all gave input with their sets of attorneys. You'll hear often we'll say that you want to get an agreement done, you got to kick the attorneys out of the room, and that's exactly what happened here. The parties, Bruce Blakeman and the 5 unions, agreed to assign former New York City Supervising Judge George Silver as a mediator in this case. There was a lot of dialogue, a lot of meetings. From where we started to where we ended up, the ball really moved in our direction a good amount. So we do believe that it's an agreement that is within the best interest of our members, along with the other bargaining unit members throughout the county, and it is something that we hope that you support in this upcoming vote. So.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to address some of the rumors that came out the last few days. We are leading up to the election. Excuse me, the election. I keep calling it election. The vote, the ratification vote for it. A couple of questions came up over the last several days. One thing was about the difference between the unions and the way longevity is paid. Some people inside and outside of our department, because everybody's got a friend that's a cop that tells them something, and they think that somebody's getting over on somebody somewhere. That why do the police get the longevity in their checks throughout the year, while us and CSEA, we get it in a one lump sum? That's been delineated in everybody's collective bargaining agreement, their contract over the last 30 plus years. The cops do get it spread out. They have a different amount. They do get paid a higher longevity than us and CSEA do. And that's simply because of contracts over the last years and concessions and different things like that where it's worked out. But the police, all 3 police unions, they actually had a different rate for each of them. They all solidified their rate. They all took the same reduction, and now they're going to be getting the same amount. So one isn't getting any more than the other. They all took certain reductions to get this deal done, but they do spread it out over the course of the 12 months of their paychecks. Us and CSEA, we have the same exact amount of longevity, and just for reference, that affects in the CSEA for comparison in law enforcement with us is the deputies that work in the sheriff's department, the ambulance drivers, fire marshals, probation, all of that type of stuff, as far as when we're making comparisons. We do get paid a one lump sum on or about March 31st of every year, and taxes are taken out of that, and it goes into all your different types of whatever your spends and your pension purposes and all of that, which is actually going to be here also if the members ratify this, which we hope they do, that it will affect the pensions of people that retired since 2018. A second thing that came up is that certain unions made out better in this agreement than other unions, that the police unions didn't give up as much of a percentage as us and CSEA did, that also that the police unions get all of their longevity back upon separation or termination. These are complete falsehoods. I don't know where that came from. I've actually heard from several people on our job that have a friend that's a cop. One works in this area of the county, one works in that area of the county, and somebody seems to be under the mistaken impression that the police unions get all of their longevity back 100% as if there was no freeze upon separation. 100% false. This is the agreement. This is the agreement that everybody signed. Everybody in the county, their longevity is going to be 72.22% of the previous agreement. Everybody is going to get 50% of the retro back to January 1st of 2018. And everybody has a new chart that is 72% of the old chart going forward. I hope that rectifies a lot of the questions that are out there. The election, I say election one more time. The vote is actually coming up quickly upon us. I hope everybody takes the time to come out and vote for it. I hope everybody understands that this was a long time coming. We've been frozen for 10 years with longevity. There are people on this job that started in 2005 forward that don't even know what longevity is. They've never gotten it before. I understand for the senior people, of which I'm one, taking a reduction in the chart going forward and taking a reduction in retro can be a hard pill to swallow. A harder pill to swallow is going to be sitting in court for another 5-6 years and then leaving this decision up to some judge that has ties to the county. I've said it a million times before. You look at Madeline Singas, who's the former DA of Nassau County. She's sitting on the New York State Court of Appeals right now. I don't feel comfortable going up there and having that decision and having whoever may be the county executive at that time having sway over a decision. We all know how that happens. I make the joke, and it's not a joke, where did everybody spend all their money in the NYFA lawsuit, the NYFA wage freeze lawsuit that we got? All of the county unions, collectively with all of our county attorneys, county union attorneys, worked long and hard on this. We think this is a very good deal for our members. I know some people don't like some of the numbers. I don't like some of the numbers. I wish they were better, but this is done purposely, like Brian Doyle said, to make sure that we tailor it so that NYFA has no argument. The money's budgeted. It's budgeted going forward, and it'll be covered for any future contracts going afterwards. Again, I hope everybody supports this. I hope you support and realize that the union is working very hard on your benefit for this. Next thing we'll get into contracts and we'll see where everything goes with that. I'm going to take a break now. We'll come back with the second segment. We'll be talking about HALT, and then we'll be talking about hiring and staffing and all that afterwards. This is NYSCOPBA Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in a minute. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is NYSCOPBA Union Podcast. I am Brian Sullivan, president of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. I'm going to move on to the second phase of this podcast where I want to talk about HALT. Everyone should be as aware as possible about what's going on with HALT. This past Friday was April 1st, and HALT took effect in New York State. Human alternatives to long-term solitary confinement in New York State, which is a misnomer in and of itself. That is the law that was passed through the budget process back in May of 2021 and was given a year to put into place. Myself, along with the members of the Downstate Correction Coalition, that's all represented here, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, New York City, New York State, and their respective superior officers' unions, we've all been working very, very hard in trying to get the attention of New York State legislators, former Governor Cuomo, current Governor Hochul, about either delaying the implementation of HALT or stopping HALT altogether. HALT is basically bail reform in jail. They don't want to know anything from anybody. There was no public hearings that were held last year regarding HALT. It was all done under basically what we call under the cover of night, which is under the cover of the budget process, where they don't allow any public hearings. It's the exact same thing that went on with bail reform and discovery reform, which is basically the same product as bail reform, only being done in jail. This was sponsored primarily by Brooklyn, New York State Senator Julia Salazar. This is Julia Salazar right here. There's a picture of Julia Salazar. If you ever want to read something interesting, go back and read some of the things that led up to her election as a senator, and you'll find that exactly some of the people that we're dealing with in Albany, where they're coming from, and I don't even know if they know where they're coming from. A lot of stuff in the past has come into suspect. But if you ever want to look up somebody and read some interesting reading about where people come from, read up about Julia Salazar and realize this is one of the socialists in New York State that's making laws about the criminal justice system in New York State. Her and Jessica Ramos, they're all kind of cut out of the same cloth as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was the primary, Senator Salazar was the primary sponsor of HALT, which is basically put together to limit the use of segregated confinement for all incarcerated persons to a maximum of 15 days, implements alternative rehabilitative measures, I'm reading from the law itself, including the creation of residential rehabilitation units, expanding the definition of segregated confinement, and eliminating the use of segregated confinement for vulnerable incarcerated persons. What they consider people to be vulnerable are anyone under the age of 21. We've never had any problems with minors in our correctional facilities, so why would we ever have to segregate or separate them? Stupidest thing in the world. Another vulnerable population is anybody 55 years of age or older, or the only one that makes sense is pregnant females or anybody that's within a certain amount of time of being pregnant. All of this stuff was, you could look back on this and you could look up HALT, and I'll give you a link to this also. It's absolutely insane, some of the arguments that have gone on for why we need HALT. All HALT does, according to these people, is degrade people. It degrades their mental capacity, degrades everything else, and limits their interaction with other people, makes them more violent. Obviously, these people have never worked in a jail before. What makes me laugh about some of this stuff is there's another supporter of this, another person that we deal with all the time. This is Queens Senator Jessica Ramos. Jessica Ramos is also one of the socialists that's calling the shots up in Albany. Myself and a couple of other members of the Downstate Correction Coalition, we were on a Zoom call a couple of months ago with Senator Ramos, talking about jails, trying to get them to see the light with HALT, that they need to delay things, talking about some of the sexual abuse cases that go on. We're putting forward legislation to protect our female correction officers with better laws and protections about sex crimes from inmates. Senator Ramos actually argued with us that she disagrees with most of what we say because she knows how correctional facilities are run, basically called us liars. She knows how correctional facilities run because she's been going to correctional facilities since she's 10 years old. She's been visiting numerous members of her family who were Colombian drug dealers that have been all over the state and in the federal system, so she knows how jails are run. It's much like a Nassau County legislator told us many years ago that she knew how jails are run because she saw the Shawshank Redemption. How these people are ever elected to office is absolutely beyond me, but what's worse than that is that the overriding legislature in New York State is letting the tail wag the dog here. It's absolutely insane, some of these laws that these people are putting out, but they've got support. Now, like I said before, special populations, 21 years or older or younger, 55 and older, people with disabilities, we can definitely see that. They want the prohibition of any services. They want to mandate staff to undergo a certain amount of training, which all sounded good. That was in the original law. They were supposed to mandate the hearing officers to 37 and a half hours training, and there was supposed to be 27-something hours a year for all correction officers to undergo. I'm going to get back to that in a second. Due process protections. They want attorneys to be able to come on the property of the jails and sit in on disciplinary hearings. A lot of stuff that's just going to create insane operational issues for all of our correctional facilities across the state. Then you look at people like Senator Mike Gianaris, Joseph Adabo, Jamal Bailey, Brian Benjamin, who's the lieutenant governor now, Alessandra Biaggi, who's another socialist. The people that have just thrown support blindly behind HALT are the same people that blindly threw support behind bail and discovery. And we all see what's gone on now. The budget process in New York State is actually being held up because the Democrats in this state are afraid that they're all going to get thrown out the end of this year because of bail reform and discovery reform. The average citizen, the average voter doesn't know what HALT is. We've tried to get a lot of this information out so they understand what's going on. Again, Jessica Ramos. This was her quote when HALT was passed. Every day, thousands of New Yorkers are locked in solitary confinement. Thousands of New Yorkers are locked in solitary confinement. Those inhumane practices have lasting and sometimes fatal effects on people's physical, emotional, and mental health. Today, they vote to pass the HALT Solitary Confinement Act to honor the lives of, I'm not even going to name who's here, and the countless others that were taken from us too soon, and to make sure that no more New Yorkers are subjected to the torture of prolonged confinement. This is who these people are catering to. Just like Mayor Eric Adams said this past week, he cannot understand, and I was never the biggest fan of Eric Adams in the past, but he stated this past week he cannot understand why the legislature in New York State seems to only be catering to the criminal element in this state, in the city, and not for the victims of crimes. The people in high crime neighborhoods are the ones that are being hurt by people like these senators that I've just named out. The laws that they pass and the directives that they're given that are only pro-criminal in this state. It's insane what goes on. Senator Kevin Thomas, right here on Long Island. Levittown senator, solitary confinement is inhumane. It's a torturous practice. We know that solitary confinement does not change. It does not rehabilitate. I'm proud to support this. This is right here on Long Island. I don't know how these people get elected. I honestly don't know how they get elected. Just to talk a little bit about what's gone on with the, making sure I'm not missing anything. Back in May of 2021, the New York State Correction Officers Association, NYSCOPBA, a good friend of mine, Mike Powers, is the president. He runs all the state correctional facilities. They filed a lawsuit that we're all following very closely. Basically, filing a lawsuit in federal court against the implementation of HALT. The state fought them. The case is still pending. They tried to get them to drop it on technicalities. This case is still pending in federal court, and we're monitoring closely where it's exactly going to go. The lawsuit is hinged on the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which we all argue should guarantee public employees, like their members, due process to be free from dangerous conditions created by the state. Plaintiffs, who is us, enjoy the right to be free from any defendant's laws, rules, regulations, policies, practices, and or customs that create an unreasonable risk of bodily harm or death from third parties like violent incarcerated individuals. But this reform shows a deliberate and callous indifference to the lives and safety of correction officers and all staff, as well as peaceful incarcerated individuals in the general population, that shocks the contemporary conscience. Speaking about the 15-day cap, and then you have to put people back in general population. The general public perception is that the sanctions that are provided in jails don't match up with the reality inside state prisons. Solitary confinement, as we've said numerous times in the state with people that we've met with over the last year, as we try to drive home the realities of HALT, what it's going to happen to, it's going to cause inside our facilities. They insist on perpetuating a myth that solitary confinement exists in New York State, like we're throwing people in a hole, turning out the light, feeding them bread and water. They have no access to any programs or any medical things like that. They're eating horrible, rotten food. Solitary confinement does not exist in New York State. By definition, it does not exist in New York State. You're dealing with individuals that don't subscribe or get along with the rehabilitation system. It's no different than the way it is in regular society. This law would ban the use of they keep saying solitary confinement, it's banning the use of segregation, being able to separate people that are violent, that are psychotic, that are even want protective custody. You're not able to separate these people any longer. All the people in Albany tell us is that they basically don't care. Just let them out. This is bail reform. We went to Albany several times in the last several months. We've sent memos to the governor, to the former governor, to the current governor, asking them to delay it because just over a year ago when HALT was first implemented, we were successful in getting to Governor Cuomo and saying that they need to do amendments to the law, chapter amendments. We had hoped that they would do a lot more amendments that we were asking for. The only amendments that they did was being able to segregate people that are in a psychotic state so they could be screened. And they took away all the training. We were talking about all the unfunded mandates that are being forced down on the counties and money that's going to cost the Nassau County taxpayers and the respective county taxpayers more money while we're arguing for contracts and everything else. The chapter amendment that the governor's office agreed to was to get rid of the training for correctional officers. So going forward, especially since this new session started this year, we have been all over them to reintroduce training into this. How can you do something like this in a facility and not provide training on how to deal with people, or not provide funding to the respective counties to put programs in place? Now you have the State Sheriff's Association has been trying to get some help from the Division of Criminal Justice Services. The State Sheriff's Association sent letters in opposition to HALT. They've got letters from all of us in HALT. Now we have some assurances that they were going to make changes to the criminal justice system in the budget process this year, which relate to bail and discovery. There is nothing in the budget system, in the budget process this year, to change anything with HALT. Jessica Ramos, who we sat down with, we were supposed to have a meeting with her. She conveniently wasn't available. She sat down with sent her chief of staff to sit down with us. They basically told us, tough luck. We agree you got a tough job, but it's not our job to figure out how to run your jails operationally. It's our job to basically just say, open the doors and let them all out, and you guys figure out what you're going to do. So, God only knows what's going to happen here. We've had, over the last week or so, the department has been sending people for this PowerPoint presentation that was pretty much cobbled together from the Division of Criminal Justice Services. The State Commission of Correction put out some rulemaking things last week that basically don't tell us anything on how to run it. There's no funding to put RRUs together. The BMU was closed last Friday. The BMU sergeant's post was cut. I'm being told by the department that that's going to reopen at some point once some changes have been made and they make it into more of what these RRUs are supposed to be, more of a therapeutic atmosphere. They're going to pipe in some programs, things like that, so we'll be able to segregate them to a certain point. But all these people have done, including the leaders of each of the houses, including the governor that signed off on all this stuff, Cuomo in particular, all they've done is create a gigantic problem in corrections across the state. A lot of this was geared towards state corrections, which is why state corrections took the lead with that lawsuit. But they didn't really understand how it trickled down to the county facilities. And we're all going to have to deal with this. All they've done is create jails are once again going to be gladiator schools like they were 20, 25, 30 years ago when I for over 30 years ago when I first started here. We didn't have BMUs. We didn't have high risk tiers. We had tiers full of shitheads. You have a shithead tier, you have another shithead tier. You got to let them out together, and it's whatever happens. That's the stark reality of this. That's what these people, these goody goodies, and these pro criminal legislators in the state don't understand. You can't reason with unreasonable people. I used to make a joke years ago. You try to talk to a guy who's got a radio on and he's got his underwear around his head. How are you going to talk reasonably with a guy that's got his underwear in his head and he's half psychotic? They don't want to give them the proper mental health medication, everything else. We're going back to gladiator school, and I know it may be a different breed of inmate today, maybe it's a different breed of officer, but there's going to be some stark realities that come out of this. And I assure you, and I've told them, and I personally told the Senator Salazar's staff when I was up there that, God forbid, one of our officers is hurt or worse, or an inmate is hurt or worse because of these policies, I'm going to put that face in every newspaper in New York State that you caused this. So just be aware of it. And you can be all proud of it and all the wonderful stuff you're doing for criminals in the state, but you're certainly going to be held responsible for it going forward. We'll see what happens going forward, if there's going to be in the budget system, if there's going to be any money set aside for training for HALT, which is what they're talking about. That's the only thing. They're not rolling anything back or delaying it. They're talking about giving some training, which is another stupid thing in and of itself, because that's, you know, chasing some money after the barn doors are already open and the horses are all out. I'm going to be in contact with all the supervisors in the jail and the county about how this progresses, and I'm certainly going to be holding a lot of people's feet to the fire and accountable for what goes on here, the decisions that are made. Our department in our county is at the mercy of the state, but you know, you still have, everybody's got responsibility here. God forbid somebody gets hurt. I'm going to end that as the second portion that's related to HALT. I'm going to take another break. We'll come back in a few minutes, and I'll talk about staffing, hiring, and promotions. Thank you. Brian Sullivan, NYSCOPBA. I keep going to say NYSCOPBA Monthly. NYSCOPBA Union Podcast. Thank you. All right, everybody, welcome back to the COBA Union Podcast. Brian Sullivan, President of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. This is segment 3 of the April 2022 podcast. I just want to touch a little bit on one of the biggest issues going on in the jail now, obviously, is hiring, staffing, promotions, the whole 9 yards. Going back to, it's got to be 2021, we were actually going back to 2018. I have testified in front of the Nassau County Legislature and been sounding the alarm about the staffing crisis here at our jail for several years now. And I'm not alone in that. I want to make sure everybody here understands that we're not alone. This is the same for every other Department of Corrections in New York State. All of the other counties, you just look at what's going on in Rikers Island. It's a disgrace with how bad they've gotten in Rikers Island. Suffolk County is the same way. Westchester is the same way. And I hate to keep sounding like a broken record, but it's bail reform. This goes back to 2019 when bail reform was put in place. And before COVID, the general, nobody will ever admit to it, but we know from talking to people in the state that the general consensus was when bail reform went into effect in 2019, all of the respective municipalities in New York State were looking to find a way to lower the cost of incarceration. I've given bail reform seminars, everything else. I've given, Pat Ryder is the Nassau County Police Commissioner. He did several of the seminars with me also regarding bail reform. This all started back. They're trying to talk about how it's the, like I talked about before, the socialists and everything else. They want to act on behalf of criminals. A lot of people have also been working to lower the cost of incarceration. The incarceration rate in New York State has been steadily decreasing for the last decade, well before bail reform ever came into place. But going back to 2013 with the Lippman Commission, when they first wanted to figure out how to close Rikers Island, that's the genesis of all of this stuff. They wanted to figure out, once bail reform was actually able to get shoved down our throats when it became a one-party rule in New York State, how can we get the staffing down lower so there's less of a cost of incarceration in their minds, conversely, because we have less inmates. If there's less inmates, you have less officers that have to watch them. That doesn't work. It doesn't work that way because there are certain things that have to be done. There are certain programs that have to be done. There are certain security requirements. Yes, there may be less housing areas, but then you also have COVID. And we went from, to me, the Nassau County Jail should be housing anywhere from between 1,600 to 1,800 inmates. That's been the steady thing over the majority of my career. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we got down to about 1,200, 1,100, 1,000. Then COVID hit, then bail reform hit, and we lost 300 inmates. We were down to 700, 750, almost 800. Then COVID hit, we were down to 500 inmates. When COVID hit in 2020, I'm going to make sure I got my years right, we lost 67 correction officers through either attrition or retirement, and we didn't hire anybody. That's where we took the torpedo in Nassau County in particular, and a lot of the same things happened in the other municipalities. That's where we took the worst hit that we haven't been able to climb back from. The counties, when the current administration was here, they didn't want to admit that's what they were doing. In 2019, they hired 40 here, and they thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It was the most that they hired, and we told them, you're already behind the 8 ball. And then when COVID hit, and we lost those 67, we've been in a hole ever since. That's the problem. Just to go over some of the stats here,
Since January of 2018, we've hired 131 correctional officers in Nassau County. In that same time period, we've lost 191. It equates to a net loss of over 60 officers in 3 years. The majority, like I said, of that net loss was in 2020 when they didn't hire anybody. And a little more in detail, in 2018, we hired 57 correctional officers, lost 46. In 2019, we hired 23, lost 42. Like I said, in 2020, we hired 0, lost 68. And we had in 2021, we hired 48 and lost several of those to other jobs. We were fighting long and hard with the current administration, who tried to convolute our contract with the hiring, that they wanted to wait until we got a new contract, until they did hiring, in case they could hire people under different terms. Maybe they could save some money, all this type of stuff. Then the current administration ended up losing. The Blakeman administration comes in. The people that were running the Blakeman administration had no idea that any of this stuff was going on. They did keep several key people that were explaining to us and have actually been trying to help us. Deputy county executives, things like that. But since January, and of course there was a big turnover here. They changed over a lot of the department heads. A lot of new people came in, and I hate to use the word honeymoon period, but you have to give them a little bit of time to get themselves up and running, get a new government up and running. So we've been hitting this issue extremely hard that we need bodies here. We're losing people left and right, and we're already so far behind the 8 ball, we're losing bodies. We need ancillary units filled. We need promotions. We've lost so many bosses here since 2018. We have gotten a lot of understanding from the county administration, and we actually put together a program with the county over the last couple of months. I've actually been meeting every 2 weeks with the county executive, representatives from the county executive's office, from civil service, from county HR, and our department, explaining exactly what the deal is. One of the things that held over from the current administration that we did not really know at the time, because they were yesing us to death, was that they weren't processing people as much as they claimed that they were processing people to start this job. We all know that they hired 1,200 cops since 2014 in Nassau County. The police department seems to get whatever they want. Every other department in Nassau County, aside from the police department, knows that the police department is the fair-haired child of the county. They're down ambulance drivers, they're down fire marshals, they're down probation people. All of the people that were let out of our jail that were put on probation, the workload of the probation people has doubled. Of course, we don't see that here, and I know members may not even care. But this is the reality that everybody in the county is dealing with. But the reality that we have dealt with is that back in January, they only had 11 people ready to go for a class here. That was moving along. We were told that we were going to hire a class of 20. We thought that was laughable in the middle of March. We thought we've told them you need to hire at least 100 people here, 100, 125, maybe 150 people this year to catch up on the staffing crisis, because we're going to lose more people this year to attrition. The county has been very amenable to it. They did give me a goal of hiring at least 100 correctional officers this year, but right off the bat, and I blame civil service for it. I blame all of this falls squarely at the feet of civil service, that they're not processing all of these packages that go out. I've said this numerous times before. Everybody's got a friend or a kid or a neighbor that got a package. Yeah, they'll send out packages, but then they don't process the packages. They don't send them to PD to do the backgrounds. The issue comes up of us doing our own backgrounds. That's another issue that I'll get into at a different time. The biggest issue is that we agreed they were going to put this class of 20 in March, and then we're going to follow up with at least 2 more classes of at least 30 in each class. As they were about to put this class in, the 20, I sent it out in an email, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, that 5 of the 20 that did all their backgrounds, did their medicals, their physicals, their psychologicals, they decided to defer. They didn't want to take the job at this point. 4 more, they didn't answer up to the call. So now that 20 went to 11. That's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. It can't be allowed to go on like this. And I've had some very heated conversations with civil service, with county HR, and with the county exec's office, that somebody's got to get off their ass and crack the whip with the way the backgrounds and the tests are done with civil service. So now there was actually an argument of, do we put the 11 in and then try to build up the next class? I was of the assumption that putting 11 in is an absolute embarrassment to this county, to this department, to this county, and everybody involved. It was decided to push off for a couple more weeks, get that 11 back up to a respectable number, 20, 25, maybe 30. We'll see how fast they can get it done, because everybody involved was embarrassed, and they should be embarrassed with the way things have gone on here. So that's the plan right now. And just so everyone understands, every 2 weeks, and I believe next Tuesday, I'm sorry, I usually don't get the dates of these things because it's a little bit off, but the third week of April, beginning of the third week of April is the next meeting with everybody with civil service for updates. I requested and I've demanded, and the county has agreed, that we're going to have 2-week status update meetings on all of these backgrounds so we can get these classes done and start backing them up so we get the proper amount of people in here, because it can't go on the way it is. We all know that. Just to shift a little bit into the supervision here, since 2018, we've lost 33 supervisors in this jail, 33, and only promoted 7. Since 2018, we've lost 3 captains, not including 2 captains that are right on the bubble now that may be leaving. We've lost 6 lieutenants since 2018 and not promoted any. We've lost 13 sergeants. They promoted 7 back, only 6 of which are online. 1 works upstairs. We've lost 11 corporals, promoted 2 back since 2018, and that was only because we complained that list was expiring, if everybody remembers last year. They were actually going to, under the current administration, they were going to let the corporals list expire after 4 years and never promoting 1 person off that. They promoted 2. It's a sin what goes on in this place. So now I have all of these things about where all these holes are in the post coverage, where all the corporal post coverage is in particular. They're running housing areas on a day-to-day basis with no supervisor, with no corporal. How that is allowed to go on by this sheriff, by this county, by anybody is beyond me. The liability that's involved in this, and you know, the sheriff has dug his heels in a little bit that he doesn't want to do anything for ancillary units or promotions until they hire. Meanwhile, I don't know how forcefully I know he's asked, but he's certainly not asking as forcefully as we are, because we go back to the appointed sheriff stuff, where they don't have the same voice as an elected sheriff, where I'm banging the drums, but I'm only the union president. I'm not the department head. They can ask for all they want. They get turned down. No, there's no other remedy for that sheriff to go to, as opposed to an elected sheriff like Suffolk County, where a sheriff can go to the public and say that I'm not gaining the support that I need. We're creating dangerous situations here. So the only voice coming out of this jail is the union's voice and the members' voice to their respective elected leaders. Now, like I said, you have housing areas going unsupervised every day. There's officers working up, which violates the contract. There's sergeants working down, which technically violates the contract. You have ancillary units that are missing people left and right. We've had a huge issue with the ID unit in and of itself. We lost a supervisor in there, and we're down bodies in there. That's a problem, and we've had recent arbitrations and litigation over it. We're down bodies in transportation every day. We're down bodies in rehab. We're down bodies in medical. This actually came out in a meeting, one of those 2-week status meetings, where the county budget office didn't really have a grasp on why we were down so many bodies, because they look at security. Security is where the overtime budget comes from. Why are we using so much money in overtime out of security if it looks like the platoons are relatively full? They didn't take into account that people in the security unit are getting farmed out to ancillary units all the time. Or, you know, everybody, I'm not going to get into all the minutiae of all of that, but a lot of people are getting farmed out. People on the 4 to 12s are coming in early to work ancillary units, things like that are not available to work for a midnight. This is all the stuff that snowballs here, and we all know exactly what goes on, that the county doesn't get, that we have to keep explaining to them, and we have to make sure that the department and the sheriff and the people that are calling the shots behind this department are reiterating to people. We can't just dig our heels in and say, we're not going to do anything until they give me bodies. If they're not giving you bodies, you have to explain where the bodies are. I'm explaining where the bodies are. And that's the point going forward. I'm going to be on top of this. We're hopeful that a class of at least 20, 25, maybe more, is going to start by the end of April. May 1st, the latest. We've gotten certain assurances that there's going to be numerous promotions made to fill in these corporal areas, to fill in, the sergeants and lieutenants that are missing. There was a lieutenant spot missing on midnight. We have ancillary units that are missing supervisors. It's an untenable situation. It cannot be allowed to go on. And how the county does not see the liability in this is beyond me. So I'm going to wrap it up there. We're gonna have continued meetings with this stuff. I again hope, going back to the longevity issue, that everybody understands exactly where all the unions stand on that, and we do advise and hope that our members do vote for this longevity going forward. And then it's on to contract land, and that's another whole issue that we'll get into down the road. I want everybody to stay safe. Thank you for listening to the NYSCOPBA podcast, and I'll see you in May. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe.